The unexpected comment. Kara had always expected the unexpected during her diplomatic missions. But nothing could have prepared her for this. As she stepped off the transport ship and into the sterile, metallic corridors of the Virian flagship, she felt a mix of excitement and dread. The negotiations with the Virians had reached a critical point, and Kara, as Earth's chief envoy, was the one chosen to represent humanity in these tense discussions. She had prepared for hours of talks, cultural exchanges, and maybe some tense moments, but not this. Lord Zoran, the Virian commander, greeted her with a sharp, cold look. His stature was imposing, and his alien features seemed almost too perfect, with smooth, silver-blue skin and dark, calculating eyes that held her gaze for far too long. He said little, merely gesturing for her to follow him down a long hallway lined with advanced alien technology, pulsing with a soft, bluish glow. Kara couldn't help but notice the strange atmosphere in the air. It was charged, as if something was hanging in the balance, something she couldn't quite grasp. "Thank you for coming, Kara of Earth," Zoran finally spoke, his voice deep and commanding. "Your people's request for peace is intriguing. But peace is not so easily earned among the Virians." Kara nodded, her hands folded politely in front of her. "I understand, Lord Zoran. And I'm here to do what I can to ensure that peace becomes a reality. To build a lasting bond between our people." Zoran stopped in front of a large, transparent door, motioning for her to enter. Kara stepped through and found herself in a grand chamber unlike any she had seen before. The walls were etched with intricate alien symbols, and the air smelled faintly of incense. Calming yet alien, the large room was empty except for a single pedestal in the center where a glowing device sat waiting. Before she could ask about it, Lord Zoran's cold voice rang out. "You will understand soon enough, Kara. The Virians do not trust easily. Your people speak of peace, but peace must be earned." Kara was about to respond when Zoran's eyes narrowed, his gaze turning colder. "But before we proceed, there is one Virian law you must comply with." Kara raised an eyebrow, already uneasy. "What kind of law?" Without answering, Zoran motioned toward the pedestal. "The law demands that you show complete surrender. You must demonstrate trust. There are no exceptions. You will undress before the council as proof of your willingness to accept our customs." Kara froze. The words seemed to echo in her mind as she tried to comprehend what he was asking. Undress? She had heard of strange customs in alien cultures, customs she had worked hard to understand and respect, but this was beyond anything she had anticipated. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling, trying to maintain her composure. Zoran remained stoic, his expression unreadable. "This is the ritual of trust. Only by revealing yourself fully physically and emotionally can you prove that you are truly worthy of peace with the Virians. Our culture requires this. It is an ancient law." Kara felt a rush of anger and confusion. She wasn't just a human diplomat, she was a representative of her entire race. How could she be expected to undergo such a personal, invasive ritual in the name of peace? This wasn't just an alien law, it felt like a violation, like an attempt to break her down, to strip away everything that made her human. I can't do this," Kara said, her voice firm. Stepping back, "I came here to negotiate peace, not to perform some ritual." Zoran's expression didn't change. "You do not have a choice. You must comply, or your presence here will be seen as an insult to the Virians. Your people will not be able to negotiate peace without this step." Kara's heart pounded. She felt cornered. If she didn't comply, Earth's chance at peace with the Virians would be over before it had even begun. But how could she agree to such a thing? The very thought made her feel exposed, vulnerable, as if her dignity was being stripped away with every word that came from Zoran's mouth. "You do this because you think I have no other option?" Kara asked, her voice a little sharper now, frustration lacing every word. "You think I will just give in to your law?" Zoran met her gaze, his eyes were cold. But there was something there, something flickering, that she couldn't quite understand. "This is the way of my people, Kara. You must trust in this ritual if you wish to proceed." Kara was silent for a long moment, the weight of his words, the pressure from the alien law, was suffocating. She had no idea what to do. She had come here to negotiate, to represent Earth with honor, but this felt like a violation of everything she stood for. Her thoughts were interrupted as the door behind her opened, and members of the Virian Council stepped inside. They were tall, imposing figures, their eyes focused on her with cold detachment. She had read about the Virians before, how their race valued strength and ritual, how they believed that trust could only be earned through total surrender, but the reality of it, standing in front of her, was far more terrifying than any report had described. Kara's mind raced. She had always been the calm, composed diplomat, but now she was faced with a decision that felt impossible. Should she fight this law, refuse to comply, and risk losing everything, or should she submit? believing that it was the only way to save Earth's future. As the council's cold eyes watched her, Kara felt a new weight on her shoulders. This wasn't just about peace anymore, it was about proving something deeper, a test of trust, of strength, and ultimately of her willingness to face an unknown future. The alien law had demanded she undress, but it was Zoran's gaze that made her question everything. What was he thinking? Was he just another part of the system enforcing his people's law? Or was there something more to him than the cold, calculated officer she had first met? Kara stood there, torn between the alien law and the strange pull she felt toward Zoran. This was more than a diplomatic mission, it was the beginning of a dangerous, complex relationship that would change everything. The test of trust. Council's silent gaze burned through Kara as the weight of their expectations pressed down on her. The ritual had been explained, but nothing had prepared her for the coldness of the Virian law. She could feel her pulse quicken, her hands trembling slightly. But she refused to let them see her fear. It was her job to remain composed, to stand firm. But the laws of this alien race were far more complex, far more invasive than she could ever have imagined. Kara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She glanced at Lord Zoran, whose cold, calculating demeanor was unchanged. His presence was imposing, and despite everything, he had yet to say a word in her defense. She had thought he was different, but now she wasn't so sure. He was just like the rest of them, bent on following tradition and upholding the laws. No matter how violating they were. Lady Kara, you must comply with the ritual of trust. One of the council members, a tall, stern figure, spoke again. His voice was icy and indifferent. Almost as if Kara's comfort was irrelevant, the air felt heavier as they all stood around her, waiting. Her mind raced, searching for any way out of this predicament. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore, it was about her own autonomy, her very sense of self. And yet, she couldn't afford to ignore the dire consequences of refusing. What would happen if she denied them? Would Earth's mission with the Virians collapse before it even began? She had to admit that the stakes were far higher than her personal discomfort. But her body felt tight, her chest heavy as she fought against the impulse to walk out. To reject this demand entirely, Zoran stepped forward at last, breaking the heavy silence that had filled the room. His movements were calculated, his presence dominating. He stood beside her now, his tall frame almost engulfing her in the quiet tension. Lord Zoran, Kara said quietly, her voice just above a whisper, please, explain this to me. This law, it doesn't make sense. How can I prove my trust this way? Zoran's gaze softened ever so slightly. Kara saw something flicker behind his eyes. Was it regret, compassion, whatever it was? It made her pause. This is the way of my people, he said slowly, his voice almost distant. We do not trust easily, Kara. But this law, it has stood the test of time for a reason. It is not about the body. It is about what lies beneath the willingness to expose your heart and soul, to show that you are vulnerable. Only then can the Virians know that your intentions are true, that your peace is not a mask. Kara's heart raced at his words. She could feel the weight of his gaze, steady and unwavering. But there was something else in it, something that made her question the reasons behind his obedience to this law. He wasn't just enforcing tradition. He seemed to be struggling with it, almost as if he was torn between his duty and his own feelings. The Virian Council, watching the exchange closely, waited for Kara's next move. They were silent, their eyes cold, unreadable. They were waiting for her to comply, to prove that she would sacrifice her dignity for the sake of peace. But the more Kara thought about it, the more she realized that this wasn't just a test of her physical trust. It was a test of her spirit. It was about what she was willing to risk, not just for Earth, but for herself. Could she endure this ritual? Could she let go of her pride? For the sake of something larger than herself. Zoran stepped closer, and in that moment, Kara saw something deeper in him, a flicker of compassion, of understanding. It wasn't just the officer's duty that drove him. There was something more to him, something different. I don't want to do this, Kara, Zoran said softly, his voice almost a whisper. But this is the law, it is my duty to enforce it, but there's more. There's a part of me that wishes this could be different. Kara's heart skipped a beat. Could he be feeling the same way? Did he see her as more than just a human representative, an object to be tested? His gaze never wavered, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked in an unspoken understanding. She felt a warmth in his stare, a depth she hadn't expected, but was that enough to make this law any less terrifying? Could this fragile connection they shared outweigh the oppressive weight of tradition? The council's gaze turned to Zoran, waiting for him to take charge, to enforce the ritual. Kara felt the room closing in around her, suffocating her. But she knew that this was not just about the law, it was about her. She had a choice to make. In that moment, something inside her shifted. She had come to Viria to negotiate peace, to bring her people together with this alien race. But peace wasn't just about words or treaties. It was about understanding, trust, and sacrifice. She wasn't going to let fear control her anymore. Kara turned to Zoran, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. I'll do it, but not just because you demand it. I'll do it because I believe in the possibility of peace, because I trust you. But this is my choice. Zoran's expression softened. A small hint of relief in his eyes. You will not regret it, he said quietly, almost like a vow. The council nodded approvingly. But Kara barely noticed them. She was focused on the moment. For the first time since she had stepped onto the ship, she was no longer just a diplomat, she was someone who had made a choice. Someone willing to take a leap into the unknown. As the council prepared to proceed with the ritual, Kara steeled herself. She was about to reveal not just her body, but her willingness to be vulnerable. She had no idea where this would lead. But she knew one thing, she was no longer bound by fear, and with that, she took her first step into the unknown. The unseen strength. Kara stood there, her heart pounding as the Virian Council observed her every move. The soft hum of the alien ship's systems faded into the background, leaving her with only the sound of her own breath, steadying as she prepared for what was about to come. Despite the overwhelming sensation of being exposed both physically and emotionally, she felt a surge of resolve she hadn't expected. The room seemed to grow colder, and the weight of the moment pressed down on her shoulders. But there was something within her now, a fire that hadn't been there before. Zoran's gaze, his quiet words, had unlocked something inside her, something that had been hidden beneath layers of duty, professionalism, and the carefully built walls she had placed around herself. It wasn't just the law that demanded her surrender, it was the reality that sometimes peace demanded vulnerability. She turned her gaze toward Zoran, his eyes, those deep, penetrating eyes, held something she couldn't fully understand. Something neither cruel nor indifferent, but full of an emotion that almost seemed foreign to her. In this alien place, there was empathy in them, a silent understanding that made the walls of her fear begin to crumble. She felt less like a prisoner and more like someone in the process of awakening. He wasn't asking her to do this, he was simply standing by, allowing her to make her own choice. The trust he had placed in her was like an anchor in the storm of uncertainty. You're not just testing me, Kara said, her voice steady now, her resolve sharpening like the edge of a blade. This is more than the law, it's about seeing if I'll break. But I won't. Zoran's expression softened. But he didn't speak, his silence spoke volumes. He knew how much this cost her, how deeply this ritual tested her. It wasn't just about taking off her clothes, it was about the power of choice. The decision to place trust in a world that didn't understand her, and yet here she stood, ready to prove herself, not only to the Virians but to herself. The council watched with anticipation, waiting for her next move. Kara could feel their eyes on her, some curious, others calculating, but she refused to let them intimidate her. For once, she wasn't performing. She wasn't the diplomat, the negotiator who always had the perfect response. In this moment, she was just Kara, a woman standing at the crossroads of history, choosing to walk into the unknown. Kara took a deep breath and slowly moved toward the pedestal at the center of the room, where the glowing device awaited her. It looked so simple, yet it symbolized so much. As she reached for it, her hand shook for just a second, but she steadied it, gripping the cool surface with determination. This is my choice, she whispered to herself. The words didn't just apply to the ritual, they applied to everything that had brought her here, her journey, her sacrifices, and her fight for peace. She activated the device. A soft pulse of blue light enveloped her, and for a moment she closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the energy as it surrounded her. There was no turning back now. When she opened her eyes, the Virian Council was silent. The ritual had begun. She slowly, carefully, began to remove the layers of her uniform, each piece a small act of surrender. It wasn't just physical, each movement felt like she was peeling back pieces of her soul, revealing more of herself than she had ever allowed anyone to see. But the more she revealed, the more she realized that it wasn't a loss, it was freedom. The moment was transformative. In her exposure, she found strength she hadn't known existed. The fear that had gripped her at the beginning was now replaced by something much deeper, a quiet, unshakable strength that came from choosing to stand up, to trust, and to believe in something greater than the constraints of this alien law. As she finished, the room seemed to pause, the energy of the moment shifting in a way she hadn't expected. She was no longer just Kara, Earth's diplomat. She was a symbol of something more, a woman who had chosen to face her fears and embrace vulnerability in the name of peace. Zoran moved closer, his gaze soft but unwavering. He didn't speak, but the way he looked at her told her everything she needed to know. There was respect in his eyes now, a deep understanding that went beyond words. For the first time since stepping foot on this alien ship, Kara felt like she had control over her own destiny. The law had demanded this ritual, But it was she who had chosen how to respond. It wasn't the law that defined her, it was her choices. "You're stronger than you realize," Zoran said quietly, his voice full of admiration. "I didn't expect you to stand as you did." Kara didn't reply immediately. She didn't need to. His words were enough. She had done what was asked, and now there was nothing left but to see if the Virians would honor her decision. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable, but Kara noticed something. It wasn't the cold judgment she had expected. Instead, there was a quiet recognition in their eyes, a shift in how they viewed her. "Lord Kellen." The head of the council finally spoke. "Your trust has been proven. The ritual is complete. But remember this, Kara of Earth, the path you have chosen is not without its consequences." Kara stood tall, her body exposed yet somehow more powerful than she had ever felt before. "I understand," she said, her voice calm, firm, "but I will walk this path, no matter the cost." She had come here to negotiate peace, but what she had just done went beyond diplomacy. It was a declaration of her willingness to break barriers, to trust, and to fight for something better. The Virians may have their laws, but she had her own strength, and with that strength she would face whatever came next. Alongside Zoran, and together they would reshape the future. The silent rebellion. Kara had expected the silence of the council room, but the weight of it now felt unbearable. The ritual was complete. She had stripped away her fears, her dignity, her pride, everything to earn their trust, or so she hoped. The Virian Council, a collective of ancient and stoic figures, stared at her with their cold eyes, their faces unreadable. Kara's heart thundered in her chest as their gaze lingered on her. She could feel her vulnerability hanging in the air, exposed like never before, but what she hadn't expected was the unexpected shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't the cold, calculating silence she'd braced herself for. No, it was different, strangely quiet and almost respectful. Lord Kellen, who had presided over the entire ritual, stood motionless at the head of the room. But there was something new in his expression. The stern lines of his face had softened, and his eyes were less critical than before. She could feel a change happening. But the question still lingered, did they truly accept her? Or had she merely fulfilled a formality in their eyes? After what felt like an eternity, Kellen finally broke the silence. "You've done as requested, Kara of Earth," he said, his voice low, but the words carried weight. "You've proven your commitment, not just to us, but to your people. For this, we acknowledge you, but remember, the truth of this ritual goes beyond your body. It is a test of trust, one that your people must also understand." Kara felt a wave of mixed emotions wash over her. It wasn't exactly the acceptance she had hoped for, but it was more than she had expected. She had succeeded in the ritual, but the journey ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty. "We will move forward with the treaty," Kellen continued, his gaze now shifting to the council. "But know this, Kara, the cost of your choice is not yet fully realized. The law of the Virians is sacred. There are those who will not accept this defiance, this weakness." As they see it, her chest tightened. It wasn't over. The council had acknowledged her, but there were factions within the Virian race that would see her actions as a betrayal. She hadn't anticipated this kind of danger, not from the council, but from those who still believed in the strict, traditional ways of the Virian Empire. Kara felt the eyes of the officer, Zoran, burning into her. He was standing a few feet away, his expression difficult to read. But there was a glimmer of something there, hope, perhaps, but also something more, an understanding that ran deeper than the rituals they had just endured. He didn't just see her as a human diplomat or a negotiator now. No, Zoran saw the person she had become through the ritual, vulnerable, yes, but stronger than before. His soft voice broke her reverie. "You've done well, Kara," Zoran said, his words quiet but sincere. "You showed them who you are. More importantly, you showed yourself who you are." Kara turned to face him, her eyes meeting his for the first time without fear or hesitation. His presence felt different now, more comforting than ever. His gaze held a quiet admiration, but there was more beneath the surface. There was something unspoken, something about the way he was standing, the way he was looking at her, that made her heart skip a beat. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than before. She didn't need to say more. They both knew the gravity of what had just happened. "But we're not done yet, are we?" Zoran shook his head slowly. "No, Kara. The hardest part is yet to come." The air between them shifted, and for the first time, Kara felt like she understood the weight of his words. The Virians were not the only threat they faced. There was the council, yes, but the real challenge came from those who could not see beyond tradition. The real fight wasn't just for peace, it was for change, and that would not come easily. As the council disbanded, Kara and Zoran were left alone in the grand chamber. The hum of the ship's systems filled the silence between them, but it didn't feel oppressive. Instead, there was a quiet understanding. They had taken the first step toward peace, but it wasn't a clear road. It was a dangerous path, and the consequences of their choices would echo across the galaxy. Kara turned to Zoran, her voice steady but filled with a quiet resolve. What happens now? Zoran hesitated for a moment before speaking, his eyes dark. With the weight of what was to come, now we fight not just for peace, but for the future. The factions will try to tear us apart. Some will never accept what we have done, but we've made a choice. And now we must face the consequences. Kara nodded, feeling the burden of his words. She knew that this wasn't just about a treaty between Earth and the Virians, it was about something much bigger. They had crossed a line, one that would be hard to erase. No matter the outcome, we'll face it together, Kara said, her voice firm. Zoran's expression softened as he placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and quiet strength. Together, Kara and we will see this through, whatever happens. We'll stand by each other. As they stood side by side, looking out into the vastness of space, the weight of their mission was clearer than ever. The road ahead was uncertain. But Kara knew one thing for sure, she wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. The tipping point days following the council's decision felt like they moved in slow motion, each one heavier than the last. The tension on the ship had shifted. It was no longer just a matter of securing peace, it had become a battle of ideologies. Kara could feel the eyes of the Virian soldiers on her wherever she went. The whispers of dissent thickened the air. There were those among them who could not and would not accept the path she and Zoran had chosen. It was one thing to follow the law, to accept the ritual, but to embrace it as a symbol of something larger? That was dangerous. Kara spent her days preparing for the next phase of negotiations. But in her heart, she knew it was not about treaties anymore. It wasn't even about Earth or Viria, it was about changing the future, and that was something no one could predict. She had given herself fully to this cause. And yet the unease in her chest grew. She couldn't ignore it. Zoran, too, had been distant the last few days. He wasn't just an officer anymore, he was a partner, and their bond had grown, but the responsibility of what they had started weighed heavily on both of them. As she sat in the command center, looking out the large window at the expanse of space beyond, Kara thought about the choices she had made. She had given her trust, her body, her heart, but what did it really mean? Was this truly the path to peace, or were they just two individuals fighting against a tide too strong to overcome? She had hoped that their union would be a symbol of change, but now she feared it might become a symbol of their undoing. Just as these thoughts clouded her mind, Zoran walked into the room, his expression unreadable. His uniform was immaculate, but there was an edge to his demeanor that Kara immediately recognized. He was holding something, an encrypted data disk, its surface glowing softly. What's this? Kara asked, her voice quieter than usual. She had seen the tension in Zoran, but this was different. He had always been calm, controlled. But now, he looked almost worn. Zoran glanced at her, his eyes heavy with an emotion she couldn't quite place. It's information from our covert operatives. There's been movement among the Virian military factions. They are planning something. Kara straightened in her chair, her heart skipping a beat. Planning what? Zoran stepped closer, placing the disc on the table. A coup, a faction within the Virian military, loyal to the old ways, believes that you and I have betrayed the Virian law. They intend to stop us, to eliminate anyone who stands in their way. Kara's stomach turned. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but she hadn't expected it to come to this so soon, so swiftly. The factions within the Virian society had always been divided, but now, those divisions were coming to a head, and she was at the center of it. We can't let this happen, Kara said, her voice firm despite the fear swirling in her gut. We have to stop them before they make their move. Zoran's eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something beyond determination, something darker, more conflicted. I've been in the Virian military for years, Kara. I've seen the loyalty they have to their traditions, to their laws. We are not just fighting for peace anymore, we are fighting for our lives. Kara could see the pain in his eyes, the weight of the burden he carried. The Virians had raised him, had molded him into the officer he was. He had always believed in the system, in the laws, but now, it was clear he was torn between his loyalty to his people and his commitment to her, to them. We'll fight together, Zoran, Kara said, her voice unwavering. We have to. If we back down now, everything we've worked for will be lost. We can't let them destroy what we've started. He nodded slowly, his eyes softening as they locked onto hers. You're right. But we need more than just words, Kara, we need action. And the Virians, my people, will not hesitate to do whatever it takes to maintain their power. We have to be ready to confront them head on. Kara felt a chill run down her spine. She had been prepared for a diplomatic battle, for negotiations that would push both sides to their limits. But now, she understood that this was more than just words, it was war. A war for their future and for the future of every world that could be affected by the outcome. Zorin placed a hand on the table, his voice dropping to a whisper. There's no going back now. The factions will move soon, and we will need every ally we can get. I've already begun reaching out to those who are loyal to you, who believe in our cause. But we need to act before they can strike. Kara's mind raced, the weight of everything they had been through crashing down on her. This was no longer about diplomacy, this was no longer about peace. It was about survival, the survival of their love, their beliefs, and everything they had worked so hard to build. We will act. Kara said, her voice steady. We'll gather our allies, we'll be ready. Together, we will make them see that peace is worth fighting for. Zoran's eyes searched hers, his gaze filled with the unspoken bond they had formed. Together, he repeated softly, but we must be strong. The fight ahead will not be easy, and not everyone will stand with us. Kara nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. She knew what they were about to face, but she also knew that she couldn't walk away, not now. Not after everything they had fought for. The stakes had never been higher, and the road ahead was fraught with danger, but they had made their choice. There was no turning back. Together, they would face the storm that was coming. Together, they would fight for a future that no one thought was possible. Asters, the storm breaks. Tension was palpable like the air before a thunderstorm. Kara and Zoran moved quickly, navigating the Virian ship's sleek metallic hallways, their minds racing with the knowledge that time was running out. The rebellion had already begun to stir in the shadows of the Virian Empire, and their every move was being watched. Zoran had gathered a small group of allies, those within the military, and the Virian Council who still believed in the possibility of peace. But as Kara stepped through the narrow passageways beside him, she knew that every moment brought them closer to the breaking point. Zoran turned to her, his expression tense, his eyes scanning the hallways as if expecting an ambush. We don't have much time, he said. The factions are making their move. They've already begun mobilizing. Kara's pulse quickened. The weight of his words settled heavily on her chest. They weren't just facing an ideological battle anymore. They were facing a full-scale insurgency. The peace they had fought for was now on the brink of collapse, and their only option was to move swiftly and decisively. Kara could feel the enormity of the situation pressing on her if they failed. It wouldn't just be a personal loss. It would be a loss for both worlds. We need to find a way to stop them, she said, her voice steady despite the growing storm in her chest. We can't let them control the narrative. Zoran, we've come too far. Zoran's eyes softened slightly, though his jaw remained tight with determination. You're right, but we can't do this alone. We need the support of the Council's true allies, those who still believe in the change we've started. Just as he spoke, a distant alarm sounded throughout the ship. The low, ominous tone reverberated through the walls, signaling that the insurgents had made their first move. Kara felt the cold rush of fear in her chest, but she refused to let it show. She couldn't afford to be afraid, not now. Not when the stakes were this high. We're out of time, Zoran said, his voice hardening with resolve. Let's go. They ran down the hallway, Kara following close behind. As the ship's corridors became eerily quiet, they reached the command center where a small group of Virian officers and diplomats stood at attention, waiting for Zoran's command. Kara was introduced to the group, their faces a mix of concern and cautious hope. These were the people who had agreed to stand by Zoran to help him and Kara in their fight for peace. But even as they exchanged glances, Kara could sense the uncertainty in the room. Everyone knew what was at stake, and everyone knew that failure meant not just the collapse of the peace talks, but the destruction of any hope for a future that could unite both races. We'll need to act fast, Zoran said, addressing the group. The insurgents have already initiated their strike. We don't know how far they've gotten yet, but if we wait too long, it will be too late. The group nodded in agreement, and Zoran quickly outlined their plan. They would take control of the Virian communications systems to broadcast a message that would tell the truth about the rebellion and the consequences of their actions. They had to make sure the Virians knew the real cost of defying peace. They had to remind them that their way forward was a choice, not a destiny. But the broadcast would only work if they could reach the central communications tower in time. Kara listened closely, her thoughts racing as she realized the magnitude of what they were about to do. The Virians had always valued strength, power, and authority, but now Zoran was asking them to fight for something different, something more fragile, yet more powerful than any weapon. Trust. As they prepared to move out, Kara took a deep breath. This was no longer about diplomacy. It was no longer about negotiating or making peace. It was about survival. If they failed, the Virians wouldn't just reject peace, they would destroy it. The insurgents would stop at nothing to ensure their power remained intact. This was the battle they hadn't been prepared for. But as Kara locked eyes with Zoran, something shifted in her. She had been afraid of failing. She had feared that her trust in Zoran might lead to destruction. But now, as the weight of the moment settled in, she realized that this was her fight. This was their fight. She wasn't just the diplomat anymore, she was a partner in this struggle. A soldier for peace, let's do this, Kara said, her voice strong, filled with a newfound conviction. Zoran's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, the tension between them eased. He nodded, and together, they stepped forward. The crew, now fully mobilized, followed them into the heart of the Virian ship's command center. The door slid open, revealing a darkened space filled with technological equipment humming with the low buzz of high-tech machinery. But amidst the chaos, Kara could see the path ahead, the only path that led toward a future where peace, however fragile, could survive. Zoran activated the communications system, and the room fell silent as the message began to broadcast. Kara watched as the display showed their message being transmitted to every corner of the Virian Empire, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. The silence was thick with anticipation. And then, as the message spread across the galaxy, Kara realized that she had done more than just defy the Virian law. She had given the Virians the one thing they needed most: a chance at redemption, at understanding, at peace. But as the rebellion continued to surge, she knew one thing for certain. Their struggle wasn't over, not yet. The hidden enemy. Kara's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the flickering display of the communications system. The message was out, broadcast to every corner of the Virian Empire, reaching both allies and enemies. They had made their stand. The council's approval had been given, but now, the true test began. The factions that opposed them were not content with mere disagreement. They were actively working to destroy the fragile peace Kara and Zoran had fought so hard to build. The Virian command center buzzed with urgency as the officers and crew scrambled to maintain control of the communications systems. Kara stood at the center of it all, her mind racing with the gravity of their situation. There was no turning back now. The message had been delivered, and the galaxy would be watching, but would it be enough? Zoran stood beside her, his expression unwavering but his eyes betraying a hint of concern. "They'll try to stop us," he said quietly, his voice almost drowned by the noise of the room. "We've crossed the line, Kara. This isn't just about our worlds anymore, it's about everything we stand for." Kara met his gaze, her resolve hardening. "And that's exactly why we can't back down. We've already seen what they're capable of. Now, they'll either accept peace or fight to keep their power, and we can't afford to let them win." Zoran's hand subtly brushed against hers, a small gesture of reassurance that spoke louder than words. There was a quiet strength between them now, born from their shared struggle and the bond they had formed. But as much as Kara wanted to believe in the possibility of peace, the reality of the situation was growing darker by the minute. The screen in front of them flickered with new updates, and Zoran's eyes scanned the data rapidly, his jaw tightened. "It's worse than I thought. The insurgents have mobilized faster than expected. They've already taken control of several key outposts. If we don't act soon, they'll have the upper hand." Kara's stomach twisted in fear. She had hoped the broadcast would be enough to turn the tide. But the reaction had been swift and violent. The Virian Empire was a complex web of power, and Kara now understood the truth. Peace wouldn't come easily. It wasn't just about her and Zoran anymore, it was about every life on both of their planets. They were at the epicenter of a battle that would determine the future of both Earth and Viria. "There has to be something we can do," Kara said, her voice rising with urgency. "We can't just wait for them to come to us, we need to strike first." Zoran nodded. "I've already reached out to our allies in the fleet. But there's more to this than just military action. The insurgents have spies inside our own ranks. If we're going to win, we need to root them out." Kara froze. Spies, the realization hit her like a cold wave. The Virian Empire's own infrastructure had been compromised by those loyal to the old ways. They had been betrayed from within, and now, every move they made was being watched. Trust was a commodity they no longer had. "Who can we trust?" Kara whispered, the weight of the question sinking in. Zoran's eyes hardened, his jaw set. "We don't have the luxury of doubt right now. We have to move fast, and we have to be smart. The insurgents will try to split us apart, but we've already proven that we can fight together. Now, we need to be tactical." Kara nodded, taking a deep breath. The room around them was filled with a growing sense of urgency as the crew worked to prepare for the counter-offensive. She knew that every decision they made from this point forward would have enormous consequences. But one thing was certain: they had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. There was no going back. As Zoran motioned for her to follow him, they moved swiftly through the corridors, their steps echoing in the quiet, high-tech hallways. Every part of the ship seemed to hum with nervous energy. The enemy wasn't just an external force, they were embedded within the very system they had tried to ally with. Kara's thoughts raced as they approached the central command room. Zoran had activated a secure channel, reaching out to their allies within the Virian military. It was clear that they had to root out the spies before launching their counterstrike. But the risks of exposing their plans were immense. They were up against a network of enemies who knew how the Virians operated. And that made them dangerous. "We don't have time for mistakes," Zoran muttered, his expression intense as they stepped into the command center. "We'll need to deploy units to key outposts, but we must also protect our intel. The insurgents will be watching." The room was filled with officers and analysts, all working feverishly to track enemy movements. Kara felt a sudden surge of determination. She had never been on the front lines of such a high-stakes operation. Diplomacy was her strength. But in this moment, she realized that the fight for peace was a much more complex and perilous battle than she had ever imagined. Zoran turned to her as the orders began to roll in. "This is it, Kara. We either win this fight or we lose everything." Kara nodded, her mind focused now. "We've come too far to lose it all now." The plan was set in motion quickly, with the first wave of counteroffensive forces moving out to neutralize the insurgent cells. Kara remained in the command center with Zoran, overseeing the operations and coordinating with their allies. Every minute felt like a lifetime as the tension built. But just as they thought they were gaining control, the first wave of insurgent forces struck faster than anticipated. A breach in their security system sent alarms ringing, and Kara's heart dropped as she realized they were under attack from within. The spies had already compromised their defenses. They were walking into a trap. Zoran cursed under his breath as he quickly issued orders to redirect their forces. The room was filled with frantic voices as everyone scrambled to adjust their strategies. Kara clenched her fists, her heart racing. This was the moment they had feared. The insurgents had anticipated their every move. "We need to act fast," Zoran said, urgency in his voice. "They've already outsmarted us once. We can't let them do it again." Kara's mind was sharp now, her diplomatic instincts kicking into overdrive. There was no room for hesitation. They had to disrupt the insurgents. "Plan before it was too late. Let's show them that we can outsmart them," Kara said, her voice filled with newfound resolve.